In this video, I'm going to show you how you can scale your Facebook ads campaign and how to test your ads in the best way possible. This applies to every advertiser. I'll show you the different spend levels of what kind of testing you should be using and also how to scale those learnings from testing to scaling so you can actually be profitable on those campaigns. This video will go in not only step by step, but in so much detail on every single nuance of what kind of testing you should do. I get this question asked so many times. I'm so excited to finally be making this video. I've spent the last decade scaling brands like Zoe, Mojo, Speechify, and now with AdManage, we launched over the last few months over 2 million ads. And I'm going to show you exactly how to test and launch your ads so that you can actually scale and win. And there's a few key concepts you will need to understand. Kind of the old way of testing was you would put in your interests, your lookalikes, all these things inside the ad set, and Facebook has really tried to move away from this and basically for you to give over the control and just broad targeting. And this is what actually most people are doing now. They're not doing interest anymore. If you actually want to scale to the maximum possible, you actually do need to go broad targeting on your ad set. There's a lot of ways you can do testing, and there's some ways that are definitely not great that I will help you avoid. And I'm going to show you exactly inside Ads Manager how you can set it up in the best way possible depending on what kind of spend level and where you're at. So when you're starting out, you actually want to keep it as simple as possible and as consolidated as possible. And there's a few different ways you can kind of do this high level. You go from one extreme of testing where you essentially have one testing ad set and you'll put 150 ads in there, and Facebook will tell you what is the one winner from that. And then you have the other extreme, which is you have one ad per ad set, which gives you the maximum amount of control, but also costs you the most amount of money to do your testing. And I'll explain you both processes on which one is best. So let's start with the all creatives in one ad set testing methodology. This is definitely the cheapest way to do your testing. There's a really key concept of like how much does it cost per creative to do testing on average when you look at your account over a month. That basically helps inform you, how much you should be spending on testing as well, because ultimately testing is a loss-making process. Most of your ads are actually not gonna win, probably over 90%. So you want to think about like how can you minimize the amount of spend that goes in testing, but maximize the amount of learnings that you get from testing as well. And it also depends on at what stage you're at. If you're starting out, or let's say like under 50K a month spend, you're gonna keep it like stupid simple in the fact that you'll probably have potentially even just like one campaign that is likely ABO minimum spend. So if I go into Ads Manager here, we can actually just like go into a campaign, and I'll explain you exactly what I mean. This is just like a draft campaign I made, but you can have either campaign budget or ad set budget. And this is CBO and this is ABO. And this makes a massive difference actually into how this works. ABO, essentially each ad set is a mini campaign, whereas CBO is the campaign has all the budget and Facebook will decide which ad set to distribute it to. Now, you can only really do campaign budget if inside of your ad set, you also have minimum spend. Ad set spend limit, set a minimum or maximum, and you can use percent or absolute value. This is the only way you can set up a campaign in CBO for testing. And this is actually pretty good. This is kind of like the best of both worlds, I would say, because you can get the benefits of an ABO with the minimum spend. So each, testing ad set will get a certain amount of spend that Facebook will force through it. But you get the advantage where it's not as much management required, because when an ad set starts to do well, Facebook will push more budget to that. This is actually really good like starter pack testing methodology. So which is CBO with min spend. And how you can think about your spend amount is you want to look at what is your CPA on your creative, and you want to essentially have a multiple of that on each ad set. What I mean by that is, let's say your CPA or cost per result, let's say it's $50. You're probably going to want to spend $250 on the entire ad set at a minimum, which is about like 5x the CPA. And that's not per creative, that's per ad set. And it also heavily depends on how many ads you do inside the ad set, which I will get into. You want to lean into Facebook's prediction model on what it thinks an ad will do well. And this is right most of the time. Obviously, there's exceptions and Facebook will miss things, but on the whole, it's actually really good. It's something that I would lean into so that you can decrease your cost per testing, because now will allow you to test more and find more winners. So a CBO with min spend is a really, really effective way to have one campaign that includes all your scaling and testing, and it's extremely simple. Then I'll go to the other extreme of there's a lot of people that will want to say, I want to spend exactly, $50 per ad so that every ad gets a fair chance of spending to see what is the best result. I'd say for most people, you actually don't want to do this because they will end up costing you so much money. It's like your cost per creative will probably go up by about 10x doing this. So that's like super important to keep in mind, but you'll get the most like clean results. But everyone knows that it's hard to get really clean results in Facebook. So it's not something I would actually aim for. You want to actually aim for how do I make the most amount of winning ads and how do I get them to scale the most, which is why testing is so important. And it's really important to have the fundamentals down. Then we go from all creatives in one ad set, kind of like a Hunger Game style. Out of 150, each ad set will essentially find a local maxima of the 1 or 2 best ads from that batch. And this will happen whether you have 5 ads or 150 ads. Facebook always does this where it will lean the spend to 1 or 2 ads. And from that amount of ads, you then need to see, cool, did it pass my benchmark of cost per result or CPA or whatever? So let's say the 1 or 2 ads got $200 to spend, but CPA was actually like 100, so it only got 2 purchases, and your target is 50. That's like not a great ad. But if it got 30 on the 100 or 200 spend on those 1 or 2 ads, and that's great. And you want to try to scale that as much as possible. So that's like the very simple basic version. And then I want to talk about what most people actually do, which is somewhere in the middle of the range of 150 ads, 1 ad set to 1 ad per ad set, which is usually like 5 to 20 ads per ad set, and it's split by different things. The reason you would do this, and you can basically call your ad set like persona or ICP or format or whatever. The most effective one is actually persona, because you want to have variations on each ad. For sure, you should always do that. Even if Andromeda says they have to be very different, it's still worthwhile doing variations. But in terms of a purely testing perspective, each ad set will have its own local maxima. So it's like, okay, this persona might hit a CPA of 100, a persona number 2 might hit a CPA of 70, persona 3 might hit 30, persona 4 200, right? So you're like, okay, 2 and 3 is the best. And then from there, that informs your creative strategy to say, okay, cool, 2 and 3 are testing the best for us. How can we make 100 more ads in that format? Not necessarily format, but ICP in different formats, and do that testing. And then how can you also just scale those existing testing, right? So that's the benefit of that. Whereas if you put all of those 4 personas, 20 ads each into 1 ad set, you've had 80 ads. You might actually miss out on persona 3 that got 70 because it all went to persona 2, which had a CPA of 30. That's the benefit of that. You actually get more learnings for your creative strategy perspective. But in terms of purely scaling, the end result is actually the same, because that 1 ad of persona 2 that had a CPA of 30 would still scale the most. And that's basically the difference on why you segment, is actually to get more learnings to help you inform your creative strategy to be able to produce better ads. And I kind of want to show you actually a way to automate this, because this is like such a manual process to split it out. Even putting 150 ads in an ad set is really annoying. So if you use AdManage, you can basically head over to the automations tab. We have a few templates which I can auto test ads from Google Drive, which is a killer thing to do. It'll connect to my Google Drive, it'll look at a folder, and I can check for a new folder in folder. So this is really good for personas. When there's a new folder with 5 ads of that persona, it will detect this, it'll check on an hourly basis, and I can put a minimum of, let's say, 5 ads for that to test. So cool, it'll detect a new folder inside my parent folder of all my creatives. I will make sure there's 5 files, and I want all files as 1 ad batch as my ad strategy. And then basically this will then grab that. It'll duplicate my ad set from my testing campaign with all of the defaults that I want. and I can name it different things. I can have many different kind of like variables and formats, and then it will go ahead and actually just launch that ad for me, which is crazy. So basically my whole testing is actually on full autopilot. Essentially my editor becomes my media buyer, which is crazy. So, I highly recommend setting this up in an automated way. You can do this with Claude as well. And we have an MCP that you can connect to, and you can automate it in that fashion too to auto launch and test. And not only does this pull from Google Drive, but also Dropbox, Air, Frame, TikTok ads, auto launch from Facebook to TikTok ads, or Media Library or Google Sheets as well, and pulling those files, whether I want 150 ads or 1 ad per ad set, or a batch of persona ads in 1 ad set. You can basically automate every single testing strategy possible and essentially be able to find more winners. A couple of things I will add as well is the cost per creative tested. In your testing campaign, if you have a testing and scaling campaign structure, you want to see how much you spent on testing and what's your cost per creative, and how you can always bring that down over time, because that will basically then allow you to test more and more ads. Another common question that comes up is, how long should I test an ad for? Minimum, I'd say a day. Maximum, you want it to be as short as possible, because you want the fastest feedback loop so that you can basically improve your ads at a faster rate, which is what you want. How long does it take? Basically, it should be as minimum as possible, but you don't want to force spend on it, because then your results will be skewed. So it should be at least 1 day, and then maybe 3 or 4 days. Some people do 7 days, but I prefer personally a shorter amount of time, because then you can find out quickly and you can iterate more quickly as well. So what actually makes a good Facebook ad from testing? It's really simple. The one metric you should ultimately look at is spend, because that is what Facebook believes will be able to actually spend the most and hit the targets that you inputted in the campaign or ad set. As long as you have good fundamentals and your campaign is properly set up in the way that I was describing, then spend is the only metric you really need to look at. You can look at hook rate, click-through rate, things like that, and that could be good for creative strategy, for potentially making variations or taking parts of that video and splicing it into another video. But ultimately, you want an ad that can scale, and spend is the best indicator of that. You then have the next problem of you find a couple winners in testing. How do I actually scale this? And there's 2 ways that I will tell you that will actually make this so dead simple for you. First of all, if you have a testing campaign structure and a scaling campaign where they're both separated, which is really useful when you are at a higher spend, because you don't want to introduce volatility into your main campaign. There's 2 ways you can do it. One, you can take the winners from your testing campaign. So I can show you how I would do this in AdManage, where basically I come in here, I go into existing ads, I filter on either a different campaign or ad set, or I can sort by spend, select it. This is pulling directly from Facebook. I can even load it from a different account as well. But I click selected, and then from here, I will then select my core scaling campaign. So this is just our dummy account. We can pretend this is our scale campaign, and it will basically automatically launch as a post ID. So any of those comments that were generated or engagement from the testing process will actually stay there automatically, and you can basically then just click launch. So existing ads, where is it going? All of my copy, everything is from the original ad, and I just click use post ID. If I want to change anything, I can click new ad and actually change it. Otherwise, click post ID and click launch ads, and as simple as that to scale your ads. If you're doing an ABO setup in your testing, not only would I also transfer it over with post ID to my core campaign, but I would also increase the budget of that ad set as much as possible in that testing campaign as well, because the graduation process, basically going from testing to scaling, doesn't always work. Doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't always transfer over. And whenever you move an ad, it's always a risk. So in order to reduce that risk and actually make that ad spend a lot of money, you want to actually just scale it where it is, which is why if you have a testing campaign with an ABO setup, this is perfect for this, because ABO lets you control every single ad set budget, and the gains from testing can actually offset any of the costs that you do from your testing of all your losers. So I would essentially recommend doing both, where it's like you scale where it is in your testing campaign, if you have an ABO setup, of course, which is one of the big benefits of doing that. And then you also transfer it over with post ID to your core campaign, and you see if it can basically beat your winners. That's kind of what I would recommend in terms of the scaling process. And again, as I mentioned, not only can you do it like this with post ID automatically, but we also have automations that can just scale top performers automatically. So we have a trigger on like meta performance threshold, and you can manually run or daily or weekly. You can, which campaigns or ad sets you want to be monitoring, what look back period, exclude recent days, because maybe you want at least 3 days of spend on that ad before you scale it, for example. And then you set, purchase ROAS, CPA, basically any metric you want. Ultimately, it should really be maybe like spend and CPA at minimum, I would say, or spend or CPA and whichever conversion event. And basically it will find those ads, and then it will duplicate that ad to your winning campaign. And that is basically scaling your ads on autopilot as well. So you can really automate a lot of the core media buying, the really repetitive tasks that you need to do. But you need to have good fundamentals in your account in order to be able to do this. So make sure you have a good testing strategy, which is why, this video is so important to really understand, and how you also scale those. Once you know and you have a good system for that, and you have a good win rate, graduation rate, then you can set up these automations and you can scale your account even more to beyond what you would probably even ever imagine. Another key point is if you're doing a testing and scaling campaign as separate campaigns, you want to make sure that they're both the same identical setup. What I mean by that is you want to make sure that if I go into here, your attribution on like look back and everything is the same. So if I go here, my cost per result, your attribution setting, you want to make sure that whatever you choose here, one I would recommend basically only really doing click unless you're at like a much higher stage and you want to reach more people and you're flattening out your incremental reach, which you can also see inside of AdManage in the analytics and statistics and your reach over time. You can basically see, obviously this is a dummy account, there's not much in here, but you'll basically see a chart like this and how many new people are you reaching every single month. So in order to beat that, that's when you would essentially have your engage through or view through on your campaigns. But this tends to essentially have a lot of fake conversions that are brought in, probably would have converted anyways without Facebook, which is why in testing, it's like so important to do mostly click-based attribution and testing just for the testing process. And then whatever you pick here, make sure that it's also the exact same for your scaling campaign, because the more differences you have, that will essentially reduce your graduation rate from going between the campaigns. And then, I was showing a bit of the automations. One, easily launch creatives on both the testing and the scaling process, where I could come in here, I can select a bunch of ads. I can then pick one of my ads from testing and then just duplicate it, call it, V7. And I can either launch as active or pause or change any of the settings. Most people, again, you should kind of keep it identical, which is why we have this as few clicks as possible. And then it will duplicate that. It'll replace it here automatically. And all I need to do is click launch as a new ad, obviously, and I can have basically all of my templates of all my different copies if I want, and I just click launch, and it's like as easy as that. You can also edit more granularly and in table mode and have it go into different things. You can also launch partnership ads as well. It's really, really easy to launch a lot of ads at scale with AdManage. And then basically we also have an API and an MCP as well that you can use if you want to plug this straight into Claude. And we have really good automations to auto test ads, auto scale ads, auto launch my winners from Facebook to TikTok, auto pause ads that aren't doing well, auto scale budgets, lower the budgets on the weekend, like so many different things you can imagine. This is really a pro tool that a lot of the top brands like Perplexity, Canva, The Farmer's Dog, Jones Road Beauty, so many different brands are crushing it with AdManage. Now you kind of understand how to create a killer testing campaign. It's so important to make sure you have really good fundamentals and then make sure you input the right creative, the right ads at the right velocity and volume depending on your spend level. So next question is probably like, okay, how do I make a lot of ads and actually test that many and all of that? And you can actually click the video here and I show you how you can automate a lot of that as well and essentially do all the Facebook ads process in terms of the creative side on statics. So make sure you click that video below if you want to watch that. But thank you so much for watching, and any questions or anything, you can always drop a comment on YouTube. If you are an AdManage customer, you can always Slack us there or send us a message and we'll be sure to answer.